We are delighted to be here today at the beginning of Women's History Month. And I'm Carla Hayden, the Librarian of Congress, and in that light, I must say I'm the first female to be a Librarian of Congress since 1802. And I'm delighted to be here talking about women in Congress, and this is the 117th Congress, and as you can see from our title, it's Diverse Voices Making History.
Correct.
So, Congresswoman, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so very much for having me.
It's
been a long day.
Yes, a long day.
Still more to come.
This might not be then, but I am going to ask you, it's a long day, but how did you get here? Your history.
That's a dual question. How did I get to this building right now? Being prepared and having a buggy move real quickly from the floor of the house.
But that's part of the things we were talking about, the balancing acts that you all have to have. You have to, your family and things like that. But what inspired you to go into service? You all served together, what, 14 years?
14 years.
Yeah.
Sheila was there before I got there. When did you start?
95. When did you come?
2000.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or 2000.
For now, I am one of the pioneering women that came to the United States Congress. There was a generation before me, obviously, but they were in ones and twos because, you know, the names that I remember, of course, are Shirley Chisholm, Barbara Jordan, but there was Lindy Boggs. She took the place of her beloved spouse, and Connie Morella, and a number of others, but they were ones and twos and threes.
And you mentioned Lindy Boggs, who replaced her husband. Wasn't that, and Senator Capito mentioned that in a way that there was a time when that was the traditional way for women to get into Congress. They replaced their spouses.
In many instances, and then of course, if we went over the list, there were a lot of women who came in. You know, I remember the senator from New Jersey. She was clearly a out-of-the-box person way back in the 50s. So we've had the ones and twos, but the numbers really came in 1992, the year of the woman. It really was, relatively speaking, the year of the woman. That's when Carol Moseley Braun was elected to the United States Senate.
The first.
And then there was a decent amount of women elected to the United States House. The numbers were still very small. I think my journey was it was not a journey that would lead to the United States Congress. I mean, I can go back and start talking about these things like running for student government in middle school and being sort of an aberration there. I actually became the student government president of all the student governments in the city of New York. 13. That was... Now, was I thinking about Congress? Absolutely not.
Well,
that
maybe
was not,
so now. If you were doing that at 13, you
that
had a
was
plan.
not even in my window. But it was a kind of activism, or let's be engaged in the civic process. Shirley Chisholm was active during that period of time. But then on to high school, and so that you all won't think that I'm a relic. But in high school, when I wanted to run for vice president, the boys said, you cannot run for vice president of the student government. You have to run for secretary. And to those who are in the audience, don't be dismayed. And we had a red and blue party. I did run for secretary. But it was a life-changing experience. I ran because we were on a ticket, and so I took one for the ticket. XYZ boy was running for vice president, and I had to take that spot. And so I remember it vividly. I remember being asked not to run for, so there goes the beginning gubernatorial or governmental experience, not governor, and then on to college, and then the unevenness even then, the unevenness even in college of that time frame. You can calculate the time frame that it was, but there was an unevenness. There was leadership, and then there were worker bees. We fell into the worker bee
The women.
category. Yeah, we fell into the worker bee category. But I was also someone that never stopped sort of engaging in the things that were unique and that I wanted to do. So, you know, I competed against them in oratorical contests and won, to the dismay of the defeated male. I couldn't understand how I could win and beat him. And these were experiences, I think, that carried through in those early years. And I'm obviously, it's not the 1800s, but it was certainly some earlier years when it really was a dichotomy between what women were expected to be able to accomplish. I was a pioneer with my name, Sheila Jackson Lee. So Lee is my married name. I refuse to give up my maiden name. That was a big deal in that era. You can calculate the eras of the 70s and 80s. It was a big deal to keep three names. You know, are you going to, and then it was a big deal about whether you hyphenated, et cetera, et cetera. But I've insisted, I'm on the board in Congress, Sheila Jackson Lee. I insist that you make sure that, and so my voting name is Sheila Jackson Lee. But I say that to say that things have evolved, that women were considered in a certain place. And so I continue to be a person that wanted to serve. I obviously liked being involved in government from student government on, and that's very unique that you would cast that as your beginning. But it was, and I admired persons like Shirley Chisholm, like Barbara Jordan, but like Bella Abzug, who was a
In New
real,
York, right?
yes, a real whippersnapper, if you will, and Eleanor Roosevelt, who was someone who
I looked
really
up to
achieved
her.
a feisty type of life, and then on to law school. So once you get in law school, you have a whole different mindset, and that was to be a judge. So it was never to be a person in the public, civic, elected life. You get into law school, and you are ascending to one bench after another. That's the beauty of loving the law and doing that. And my law school, there were 3 African American women, and probably 1 or 2 others. It was most of the law schools at that time frame had very few women. And so we haven't really made the real home runs until as we moved into the late 1990s, into the 2000s. We have obviously made a seismic change in the United States Congress with over 100 women and growing, which is extremely positive. Now that's the world I live in now. But women still have, I think, places to be. I'd like to see us as more corporate CEOs, more members of the boards of corporations. We have yet to become president of the United States.
The senator mentioned that as well.
Yet to become president of the United States. I think we are still needing to achieve that. And just look at the pandemic. I'm sort of going off the point, but just look at the pandemic. Statistically and sociologically, women were the most devastatingly impacted with the pandemic. We're still trying to get women back into the workforce. Women had to come out. Children were out of school. Child care was at a premium. You couldn't find it or you couldn't pay for it. And so it still shows the contrast that occurs between men and women. And of course, we have family medical leave now, and men are taking care of children. There are single parents who happen to be men. So I don't want to disregard that men are engaged more than they've ever been. But if you look at different types of history, you'll find that we still have some many miles to travel in the course of the full equality. We're fighting in the Congress to pass what I think should be bipartisan is the enhancement of child care. So you can bring down the cost that it doesn't cost any more than 7% of your income. Can you imagine, even if you were a single parent and you happen to be a woman, the idea of child care being half of your income is pretty stark, particularly if you have other children besides those who need to have child care. So I constantly have as my legislative agenda to ensure that every legislative initiative you look to see what amending can do to create a better a more effective impact on the lives of women in America. I wanted to make sure that I voted on this last amendment.
Yes.
This last amendment by Congresswoman Brownlee and Miller Meeks dealt with the larger bill, which was dealing with veterans. You never want to not vote on something dealing with veterans. It dealt with the impact of the toxicity of the burns that they would do in war, mostly in Iraq and Afghanistan. I would go there, and they'd have the big burn pits and all of the things that had to be burned, and it was enormously toxic and never diagnosed. But in any event, this last amendment indicated that there should be more mammograms available to women veterans because they too were impacted by toxic
breast cancer.
You know, just you think of these things that add to creating a better life for women. So that
being
sort
a
of goes a
woman-
roundabout way.
Right, and being a woman. So, but also I want to go back to that turning point for you. You're in law school. Were you in Yale? I know you went
I
to
was Yale undergrad. I was at University of Virginia Law School.
Okay. And when did you make that turn to say, I'm not going for the judgeship?
I never did. I went on to practice law right here in Washington, D.C. with a major administrative law firm, which means that we practice in front of all the agencies. That's another story as well. When I came to practice, even though there were women in law firms, I think I might have been the good news was I was the only associate that came in, I think, that year. And so I was a woman, but I was obviously and am a woman, young associate hired out of law school. But the firm was really predominantly male. I was driven to prove myself. And we had a major employment litigation in the federal courts. And any of you practiced in the old days, they had these gigantic suitcases of documents. So
Sometimes on wheelies later.
that's correct. And I made sure that I was the one that carried them, but I think they made sure that I was the one that carried them. It was just things like that, that you felt that you had to be one of the boys. You had to not have anybody trying to do anything for you. So in those early years, I still didn't deviate from what I ultimately wanted. I took a stint up here on the Hill from the law firm here in Washington and worked on the assassination committee of yesteryear, the one that reinvestigated the John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King assassinations. And I thought I had the dream job, and I really did. But I still, all the way, went through dealing with this question of ascending to the judgeship. When I relocated to Houston, Texas, which now I've lived more than half of my life, I went to a law firm, and so there was no stepping away from what you would do next would be to be on the bench. But ultimately, in the course of life, I did get on the bench, but a tragic loss of life of a name that you would know, Congressman Mickey Leland.
Oh, yes.
Who died in a
Plane crash
in Ethiopia, triggered a series of opportunities. Person in one position wanted to run for his position, and then I was encouraged to run for the Houston City Council, who had never had a black woman on, and that was in 1989. So that is quite recent, but quite a while back. They'd never had a black woman and very few women of any kind. They certainly had not had a Hispanic woman. And I think there might have been one white woman on the Houston City Council. They were not welcoming, to say the least.
Well, here we are at the start of Women's History Month, but we just concluded the celebration of Black History Month, and you were both. And I know that.
And that's what happened. That's what happened.
And so in terms of being in Congress and is it a dual role?
You
Or
know,
how do you see
that's a
it?
very good question. You do wear many hats. And it's interesting that both hats that you wear have their own independent journeys. I think that I like to view myself, and I enjoy representing a very eclectic, diverse, but richly, evenly dispersed, distributed members from the Anglo, Caucasian community, Hispanic, African American, Asian, in Houston, Texas. We are a very diverse community. And I consider myself a patriot. So that means that you have to represent the American people as well. And they are very diverse, and they're east, west, north, and south. But in doing so, I have a strong affinity for social justice issues. I'm on the Judiciary Committee, and I've been there since I got elected to the United States Congress. That is a long time. And I believe it is important to make the law and make the values of this country. I spent a lot of time in the Constitution, and I'm reminded of those opening words, to create a more perfect union. To do that, you have to cure some of the continuing discriminatory practices by law and by social affinity. And so I work hard on that. At the same time, we work as caucus members, as a women's caucus, that we work as Republicans and Democrats, and as a Democratic caucus, and we look at everything from the disparities in health care for women and the disparities in black maternal mortality rate. And we get women of all backgrounds to realize that black women have a higher mortality rate. So you combine that issue. I am the lead sponsor on an initiative that I have to continuously explain, but once I explain to people, they say it is relevant today. We should try to address it, and that is, I think I've even mentioned it, the HR 40, which is the Commission to Study Slavery and Develop Reparation Proposals. That is to establish a academic and sociological, psychological, scientific, educational group of individuals who would study that 246 years of slavery and how is it transcended in the 21st century. You know, that's a really far out social justice that you have to really get people to understand that it's not yesteryear, it's not why are you bringing that up again. It is a repairing, restoring approach that will fill this library with major documentation, even more than you have, which I would want that commission, once its work is finished, to lodge its materials and its work for others to come to understand that era and what and how it is impacted even today. So those are far-reaching. On the other hand, I'm dealing with cybersecurity, intelligence, budget, and so you and women are doing all of these things.
Women.
And you are able to keep your eye on what you can do to improve the lives of women, because you are historic in that you still have not been in the Congress long, even though I've had some tenure. There are new members coming in that are in 2 and 3 and 4 years. So you try to do it where
you can
wear 2 hats.
Well, we just appreciate in the Kluge Center in particular you making it over here, because we knew it was getting a little tough when you're voting and you're doing it, but you said you really wanted to make the time to come, and I hope that you know that we appreciate it. And there's more to the month, so we'll get you over here. And if just a parting thing, though, if you had any words of advice for young women who are thinking about public service, who might be in law school, might be in library school, might be anywhere, but just a few words to leave us with.
I think it's good to, and you're in public service, and we're so honored for you to be uniquely in this position, the first, and as a woman, and followed a man. So as a woman and a woman of color, you are in fact unique, and I don't know whether or not you had a direct dream or wish to be, and you may have, but
No.
maybe not.
No.
Maybe not.
No,
I
that
knew I was
wasn't
right.
our-
I don't know
wasn't
if,
our
and I
plan.
felt that you did not. But let me just say to women and to young women, I could say something trite, and I wouldn't want you to think it was trite, of follow your dream. That's one way of giving advice. But it is clear that many of us did not start out with the dream of which we are now in. And so what I'd like to offer is never doubt yourself. do the best at what you're doing. There's several ways of ascending to positions. One, you are directly focused and you have building blocks and you are networking with people and you're getting phone numbers and now emails more sophisticated, or you're getting their Instagram, or you're on LinkedIn. Or it is that you are prepared and someone notices you and tells you, this is what I think you should do. Of course, they engage you to see whether or not you're interested. When the congressional position came up in my community, it was because Mickey Leland had died, and someone else, my entry into an elective position, he died and someone else was running for his position, not me at that time, and I went on to the city council. But some years later, after, I guess, making someone take notice as a member of the city council, again, one of the first women, and certainly first woman of color, I ran for Congress. So it was a time when there were community people that said, you can do this. I want young women to know that the best way to achieve their dreams is, one, to not only have the dream, but also to be prepared if someone else comes and says, you would be perfect for this. Civic participation is crucial, and I always think, seek out intergenerational relationships. Find us. We're eager to be engaged, to be able to give the insight of our journey, but also take a moment to pause. Sometimes it happens where you can leap to a position. Many people think that is the route to take. I think the route to take is getting seasoned. No, I'm not saying get to be 90. Getting seasoned, engage intergenerationally, having experiences, and then finding your way to what seems to be for you. Again, I emphasize that what you may think is for you, someone else may come with a completely different idea because you're prepared, and you will view that as a wake-up call. You know what? That is something I would like to do. That is a place that I'd like. So don't doubt yourself. Be prepared. Engage in civic-minded activities that are not necessarily through the election. And of course, make a difference by the service that you give to others. And you'll be amazed at how far you can go.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman, for sharing your journey with us.
Look at you.
We really appreciate it, and taking this time during Women's History Month. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for waiting
a
little bit.
You were voting. we were going to wait. So thank you so much, and thank all of you for being here and for being with us today.